State Senator Maria Ramirez checked her watch as she strode through Newark International Airport's Terminal C, her heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. The evening sun cast long shadows through the massive windows, painting the terminal in shades of amber and gold. She just wrapped up 3 days of intense diplomatic meetings in New York, and her mind was already racing toward tomorrow's Transportation Committee session. Her phone buzzed with another message from her daughter, Sophia. "Mom, guess what? Made Dean's List again. 3rd semester in a row." A proud smile spread across Maria's face as she typed back a quick response. At 20, Sophia was proving that the Ramirez family's dedication to excellence wasn't limited to politics. Thunder rumbled outside as Maria approached Gate C-15. The weather forecast had warned of an approaching storm system, but she hoped to be airborne before it hit. Around her, travelers hustled with renewed urgency, their faces illuminated by the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. "Good evening, Senator Ramirez," the gate agent greeted her warmly. Having flown this route twice monthly for the past 3 years, Maria had become a familiar face to many airport staff. "We're starting priority boarding in 5 minutes. Looks like we might beat the worst of the weather." Maria nodded gratefully and settled into a nearby seat, pulling out her tablet to review tomorrow's legislative agenda. The transportation funding bill needed final adjustments, and she'd promised her colleagues concrete numbers by morning. As she scrolled through the document, snippets of conversation from nearby passengers drifted her way. "They're saying the storm might ground flights in Philadelphia. Did you see the lightning? It's getting worse. I just hope we take off on time." A bright flash followed by a deafening crack of thunder made several passengers jump. The lights in the terminal flickered once, twice, then stabilized. Maria glanced up from her tablet, noting how the gate area had grown more crowded as passengers from delayed flights sought alternatives. "Now boarding Flight 834 to Baltimore," the gate agent announced. "We'll begin with our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance." Maria gathered her belongings, tucking her tablet into her leather briefcase. As she stepped toward the gate, she noticed a harried-looking businessman rushing toward the counter, his face flushed with anxiety. Something about his frantic energy made her uneasy, but she brushed the feeling aside. The jet bridge was cool and quiet compared to the terminal's busy atmosphere. Maria smiled at Jenny Kim, the flight attendant greeting passengers at the door. She'd flown with Jenny before. The young woman always remembered her preference for chamomile tea during evening flights. "Welcome aboard, Senator," Jenny beamed. "Your usual seat, 2A, is ready for you." Maria made her way to her seat, stowing her briefcase in the overhead compartment. First class was still empty except for an elderly couple quietly discussing dinner plans. She settled into the familiar leather seat, appreciating the extra legroom after 3 days of endless meetings. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from her Chief of Staff, Isabella Torres. "Highway Committee wants to review the budget amendments before tomorrow's session. Should I send them now or wait for your landing?" As Maria typed her response, telling Isabella to wait, she noticed the businessman from the gate area boarding the plane. He was still radiating nervous energy, checking his boarding pass repeatedly as he moved through first class. Something about his behavior set off warning bells in Maria's mind, but years of political experience had taught her to reserve judgment. Little did she know, this routine Monday evening flight was about to become anything but ordinary. The next few minutes would test her patience, challenge her dignity, and ultimately lead to changes that would ripple through airport security protocols across the country. Flight attendant Jenny Kim had been working for the airline for 5 years, but something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the storm intensifying outside, or the unusual number of last-minute seat changes due to canceled flights. As she helped passengers store their carry-ons, she kept an eye on the increasingly crowded first-class cabin. The businessman who had rushed aboard earlier was standing in the aisle, his face reddening as he repeatedly checked his boarding pass. Jenny noticed how his expensive suit was slightly rumpled, his tie loosened, signs of a long, stressful day. He kept glancing at Senator Ramirez's seat, then back at his ticket. "Excuse me," He finally spoke, his voice carrying over the ambient noise of boarding. "I believe there's been a mistake. I'm certain this is my seat." He gestured to where Maria sat, already immersed in reviewing documents on her tablet. Maria looked up calmly, reaching for her own boarding pass. "I think there must be a misunderstanding," she said with the measured tone of someone used to handling delicate situations. "I'm in my usual seat, 2A." The businessman, whose name badge identified him as Robert Morgan from Standard Financial, shifted his weight impatiently. "Look, I specifically booked this seat. I always sit in 2A when I fly this route. There must be some mix-up with the system." Jenny stepped forward, hoping to resolve the situation quickly as more passengers filed past, creating a bottleneck in the aisle. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Robert handed it over with a flourish that suggested he was certain of his position. Jenny studied it carefully, aware of the growing tension. Other first-class passengers were now watching the exchange with poorly concealed interest. "Sir, I can help you find your correct seat," Jenny began, but Robert cut her off. "No need to check. I know I'm supposed to be in 2A. I booked it specifically because of an important call I need to take during the flight." His voice grew louder with each word, drawing more attention. Maria maintained her composure, though Jenny noticed her grip tighten slightly on her tablet. "Perhaps we could both show our boarding passes to sort this out," she suggested diplomatically. A young executive across the aisle had already pulled out his phone, subtly angling it toward the scene. In row 1, an elderly couple exchanged knowing glances, while a teenager in row 3 whispered something to her mother. Robert's face flushed deeper. "This is ridiculous. I'm a platinum member. I fly this route every week." He turned to Jenny. "Can't you just check the manifest?" Jenny felt her professional smile wavering. She should check the manifest. It was standard procedure, but something about Robert's aggressive certainty made her hesitate. The weather delay had already put them behind schedule, and the growing line of passengers in the aisle added to her stress. "Perhaps, sir," she began carefully, "we could step into the galley to review the seating assignments." "I'm not going anywhere," Robert insisted, his voice rising further. "This is my seat, and I don't understand why you're not addressing the situation properly." Thunder cracked outside, making several passengers jump. The cabin lights flickered momentarily, adding to the tension. Jenny glanced toward the back of the plane, where her colleague was managing the increasingly restless coach passengers stuck waiting in the aisle. In that moment of uncertainty, Jenny made a decision she would later regret. Instead of double-checking the manifest or calling the gate agent, she reached for her phone to contact airport security. It was a choice made from stress and a desire to resolve the situation quickly, but it would set in motion events that would soon spiral far beyond a simple seating dispute. "I'm calling security to help us sort this out," she announced, trying to keep her voice steady. As she dialed, she noticed Maria's expression shift from patience to concern, while Robert's face showed grim satisfaction. The storm outside grew stronger, but the real turbulence was about to begin inside Flight 834. Officer Michael Taylor pushed through the cramped jet bridge, his uniform already showing dark patches of rain from his dash across the tarmac. Lightning flashed through the small windows, briefly illuminating his tired face. 12 hours into a 14-hour shift, this was his 7th call today about unruly passengers. The storm had everyone's nerves on edge. The recycled air of the aircraft hit him as he stepped through the door, bringing with it the familiar mix of anxiety and tension that filled delayed flights. He noticed the line of passengers still standing in the aisle, their faces a mix of frustration and curiosity as they craned their necks toward first class. "Officer, thank goodness," Jenny Kent whispered, meeting him at the entrance. Her name tag was slightly askew, and her usually perfect uniform showed signs of stress. "We have a seating dispute in 2A. The gentleman insists it's his seat, but..." She glanced nervously toward the front of the plane. Michael nodded, already moving forward. He handled hundreds of seating disputes. They usually resolved quickly once authority arrived. As he approached row 2, he took in the scene. A businessman in an expensive but rumpled suit standing in the aisle, his face flushed with frustration and a well-dressed woman sitting by the window, her tablet open on the tray table. "Evening, folks," Michael said, using his practiced authoritative tone. "I understand we have a situation here." The businessman, Robert Morgan, according to his corporate ID, immediately stepped forward. "Officer, I'm a platinum member with this airline. This is my regular seat, 2A. I specifically booked it for an important business call, but this woman refuses to move." Michael turned to Maria, who was watching the exchange with measured calm. Something about her composure struck him as unusual. Most passengers became defensive or agitated by this point. "Ma'am, could I see your boarding pass, please?" Maria reached into her blazer pocket and produced her boarding pass with a smooth motion. "Of course, Officer Taylor," she said, reading his name badge. "As I explained to Mr. Morgan, I'm in my assigned seat. I fly this route regularly for work." Thunder rattled the plane's windows as Michael examined her boarding pass. The growing crowd of standing passengers added pressure to resolve the situation quickly. He was acutely aware of several phones recording the interaction. "Sir," Michael turned to Robert, "I'll need to see your boarding pass as well." Robert fumbled through his pockets, producing a crumpled boarding pass. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to miss my call. Just have her move to another seat. There must be one available." Michael studied both boarding passes, fighting the urge to rub his temples. The storm outside was getting worse, and dispatch had already radioed about 3 other situations requiring attention. He needed to wrap this up quickly. "Ma'am," he addressed Maria, his tone firming, "perhaps we could accommodate Mr. Morgan for this flight. He seems to have an urgent business matter." Maria's expression remained composed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Officer Taylor, I have an equally important commitment. My boarding pass clearly shows this is my assigned seat." Several passengers murmured in the background. The teenager in row 3 had her phone held high, live streaming the entire interaction. Jenny hovered nearby, wringing her hands, while her colleague at the back of the plane tried unsuccessfully to manage the growing backup of boarding passengers. Another crack of thunder, closer this time, made the entire cabin shudder. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight crew, prepare for immediate departure. We have a short weather window." Michael felt the pressure mounting. One sideways glance at Robert's increasingly agitated state made him reach for his radio, a decision that would soon cascade into consequences he couldn't imagine. "Dispatch, this is Officer Taylor on Flight 834. I may need backup for an uncooperative passenger situation." As he spoke those words, he noticed something change in Maria's expression, not fear or anger, but a quiet resignation that somehow made him more uneasy than any shout could have. The cabin air grew thicker with tension as Officer Taylor's radio crackled with a response from dispatch. Maria sat perfectly still, her fingers resting lightly on her tablet, years of political experience evident in her measured breathing and steady gaze. The storm outside matched the brewing tension within, rain now pelting against the small oval windows. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time," Officer Taylor said, his patience wearing thin. "Please gather your belongings and step into the aisle." His hand rested instinctively on his belt, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the watching passengers. Robert Morgan stood triumphantly to the side, his earlier frustration giving way to a smug satisfaction. Finally, he muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "Some action." The elderly couple in row 1 had turned fully around in their seats now, the woman clutching her husband's arm. The teenage girl's live stream had attracted thousands of viewers, her whispered commentary adding to the charged atmosphere. "They're trying to remove her, but she's so calm. This is crazy." Maria spoke softly but clearly, her voice carrying through the hushed cabin. "Officer Taylor, I understand you're trying to resolve this situation quickly. However, this is my assigned seat as my boarding pass shows. Perhaps we could double-check the flight manifest." Jenny Kim stepped forward hesitantly. "I can check the manifest," she began, but Officer Taylor cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Ma'am, this isn't a negotiation. You're disrupting the flight's departure," he said, his voice hardening. If you don't comply immediately, I'll have no choice but to remove you from the aircraft." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the faces of watching passengers. Some had their phones raised, others looked away uncomfortably. In row 4, a man in a business suit stood up. "Officer, surely there's another way to handle this." "Sir, please remain in your seat," Officer Taylor commanded, not taking his eyes off Maria. "This is a security matter now." Maria maintained her composure, though a slight tremor in her hand betrayed her tension as she reached for her phone. "I need to make one call," she said quietly. "No calls." Officer Taylor stepped closer. "Stand up and move to the aisle. Now." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Flight crew, our departure window is closing. We need to resolve any issues immediately." Jenny wrung her hands, looking between Maria and Officer Taylor. The manifest sat unopened on her tablet, the simple solution ignored in the escalating situation. Robert Morgan had already started placing his laptop bag in the overhead compartment, assuming victory. "Officer Taylor," Maria tried one last time, her voice still steady but carrying an edge of authority that made several passengers lean forward. "I am simply sitting in my assigned seat. This entire situation could be resolved by checking the manifest or calling the gate." Thunder boomed directly overhead, and the cabin lights flickered. Officer Taylor reached for his handcuffs, the metal catching the dim light. "Ma'am, you're now interfering with aircraft boarding procedures and refusing to comply with security personnel. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. The teenage girl's live-stream comments exploded. The businessman in row 4 had his phone to his ear, speaking urgently to someone. Maria looked directly at Officer Taylor, her expression both resigned and resolute. "For the record, Officer Taylor, I want it noted that I have remained calm, provided proper documentation, and suggested reasonable solutions. What happens next is your choice." The sound of approaching footsteps came from the rear of the plane. Backup arriving. Officer Taylor reached for Maria's arm, unaware that his next actions would soon be broadcast on every major news network in the country. In the galley, Jenny finally opened the manifest on her tablet, her eyes widening as she saw what she had missed earlier. But by then, the handcuffs were already clicking shut, and history was being made on Flight 834. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the cabin like a final crack of thunder. Officer Taylor began guiding Maria toward the exit, past rows of shocked passengers and dozens of recording phones. The storm outside had reached its peak, rain hammering against the aircraft's windows. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the back of the plane. "Wait! Stop!" A young woman in a tailored suit pushed her way forward, nearly dropping her tablet in her haste. Isabella Torres, Maria's chief of staff, had been stuck in the boarding line in coach when she heard the live stream playing on another passenger's phone. "What do you think you're doing?" Isabella's voice carried the authority of someone used to managing congressional crises. "That Senator Maria Ramirez you're arresting." Officer Taylor's steps faltered. The word senator seemed to hang in the air, creating a vacuum of silence broken only by the storm outside. Robert Morgan, who had been settling into seat 2A, froze halfway through storing his laptop. "Senator?" Jenny Kim's face drained of color as she finally pulled up the manifest on her tablet. "Oh no, no. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the seating chart, finding exactly what she should have checked 30 minutes ago. Isabella continued moving forward, now flanked by 2 other staffers who had also been seated in coach. Senator Ramirez is the head of the State Transportation Committee. She's due to chair a crucial vote tomorrow morning on airport security funding. Officer Taylor's professional mask cracked slightly, his eyes widening as he processed the information. Around them, passengers began pulling up news websites on their phones, finding pictures of the very woman he had in handcuffs. "Mr. Morgan," Jenny's voice shook as she read from her tablet, "your boarding pass. It's for Flight 843 to Chicago, not Flight 834 to Baltimore. You're on the wrong aircraft." Robert Morgan snatched his boarding pass back, his face turning from red to white as he finally read it properly. The nearby passengers who had witnessed his earlier demands now stared at him with open hostility. I must have gotten confused with the gate changes, he stammered, gathering his belongings with clumsy movements. The storm, all the delays. Maria stood quietly through all of this, her dignity intact despite the handcuffs. Officer Taylor, she said softly, I believe we can all agree this situation could have been handled differently. The teenage girl who had been live streaming jumped up excitedly. This is going viral. We're already at 50,000 viewers. Her mother tried to shush her, but the damage was done. Social media was exploding with videos of the incident. Isabella had her phone out now too, but she was making calls rather than recording. Yes, Governor, you're seeing this correctly. No, Senator Ramirez is perfectly calm. Yes, we'll need your office to issue a statement. Officer Taylor's radio crackled to life. His supervisor's voice carried clearly. Taylor, what's this I'm hearing about you arresting a state senator? The chief of police is on the other line. Jenny stepped forward with the manifest, her voice barely a whisper. The seating arrangement was correct all along. Senator Ramirez flies this route twice a month. She's one of our most frequent passengers. The storm outside began to fade, but inside Flight 834, a different kind of thunder was just beginning to roll. News vans were already pulling up to the terminal, their satellite dishes raising like mechanical flowers, searching for the latest breaking story. As Officer Taylor fumbled with his handcuff keys, his hands now slightly unsteady, he realized this routine Monday evening would follow him for the rest of his career. The metallic click of the handcuffs releasing seemed quieter than when they went on, but he knew the sound would echo in his memories for years to come. Maria rubbed her wrists gently, then straightened her blazer. Now, she said, her voice carrying the weight of imminent change, shall we discuss how to ensure this never happens to anyone else? Within an hour of the incident, the terminal at Newark International had transformed into an impromptu press conference. News vans lined the pickup area, their logos reflecting in the rain-slicked pavement. The storm had passed, leaving behind a charged atmosphere that had nothing to do with lightning. Inside the airport's executive lounge, Maria sat calmly at a wooden table, Isabella Torres orchestrating a response team around her. Phones buzzed continuously as social media exploded with different angles of the incident. The teenage girl's live stream had reached over 1 million views, while major news networks were already running teasers for their evening broadcasts. Senator, CNN is on line 1, Isabella said, holding out a phone. BBC and Al Jazeera have requested statements. The governor called twice, and the airline CEO is flying in from Chicago. Maria adjusted her blazer, the ghost of handcuff pressure still lingering on her wrists. First, get me Jenny Kim's contact information. That young flight attendant needs to know she's not going to lose her job over this. In another part of the airport, Officer Taylor sat in his supervisor's office, watching the security footage play out on a monitor. Each frame felt like a punch to his gut. His supervisor, Captain Lisa Reynolds, stood by the window, her face tight with concern. The airport board is meeting an emergency session, Captain Reynolds said, turning from the window. Internal Affairs wants to review all your body camera footage. The mayor's office has called 3 times. Taylor's radio lay silent on the desk between them, switched off after the flood of incoming calls had become overwhelming. On the wall-mounted TV, muted news channels showed his face alongside Maria's official Senate portrait. Back in the executive lounge, social media responses scrolled across Isabella's tablet. Watch this senator keep her cool while being wrongly arrested. #Flightgate. How many others has this happened to when there wasn't a camera? #Justice for all. Plot twist. Businessman was on wrong flight the whole time. #check your boarding pass. The airline's regional director burst through the door as Ty Askew. Senator Ramirez, on behalf of United Airlines, I want to express our deepest. Maria held up a hand, silencing him mid-sentence. Save the prepared statement. Instead, tell me about your employee training programs. Tell me about your protocols for seat verification. Tell me why a simple manifest check wasn't the first step. In the terminal, passengers from Flight 834 were still being interviewed by news crews. The teenage girl who had live-streamed everything, Mia Parker, had become an impromptu media sensation. I just kept recording because I knew something wasn't right, she told a reporter, her mother standing proudly beside her. Senator Ramirez was so dignified, even in handcuffs. It was like watching history happen in real time. Robert Morgan had slipped away during the chaos, but social media detectives had already found his LinkedIn profile. His company, Standard Financial, was trending for all the wrong reasons. Jenny Kim sat in the crew room, surrounded by supportive colleagues, reading an email that had just arrived from Maria's office. Your actions today were driven by pressure and protocol. Let's work together to fix the protocol. Senator Ramirez. As evening settled over Newark, the story continued to gain momentum. Political commentators debated airport security reform, civil rights activists organized peaceful demonstrations, and airline industry experts called for systematic changes in passenger dispute resolution. Maria finally stood, smoothing her skirt as she prepared to face the press. Isabella handed her a tablet showing the latest viral numbers. Over 10 million views across platforms, #1 trending topic worldwide, and messages of support flooding in from colleagues across the political spectrum. Ready, Senator? Isabella asked, gathering their materials. Maria took a deep breath, her expression resolute. You know, Isabella, sometimes the most important legislation comes from experiencing the problem firsthand. Today was troubling, but tomorrow we start fixing the system. Outside the lounge, cameras waited to capture her first public statement. The incident that began in Seat 2A was about to transform from a viral moment into a movement for change. The Senate conference room buzzed with anticipation as cameras set up their equipment. 1 week after the incident on Flight 834, Maria stood at the podium, preparing to address what had become known across social media as the first-class incident. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the packed room. Every major news network had sent representatives, their predatory expressions suggesting they expected another viral moment, perhaps calls for firing, lawsuits, or public condemnation. Isabella Torres watched from the side, remembering their late-night strategy session. They're expecting anger, Senator, she had said, reviewing public sentiment. They want fireworks. Maria adjusted the microphone, her silk blue suit a deliberate choice, the color of unity rather than confrontation. The room fell silent as she began to speak, phones raised to capture every word. Last week, I experienced firsthand what many Americans face daily in our transportation systems, she began, her voice steady. The easy response would be anger. The expected response would be retribution. Instead, I choose transformation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Maria gestured to someone at the back of the room. Officer Michael Taylor, still in uniform but without his badge, walked forward. The assembled press corps stirred, cameras clicking rapidly as he approached the podium. Officer Taylor and I have spent the past week in lengthy discussions, Maria continued, surprising everyone by stepping aside to let him speak. Not about blame, but about solutions. Taylor stepped up to the microphone, his hands trembling slightly but his voice clear. 7 days ago, I made assumptions that led to poor decisions. I expected today to be the end of my career. Instead, Senator Ramirez offered me a chance to be part of the solution. The teenage live streamer from the flight, Mia Parker, sat in the front row with her mother, specially invited by Maria's office. Her phone was up, but this time she was taking notes instead of streaming. Today, we're announcing the formation of the Airport Security Reform Task Force, Maria declared, returning to the podium. Officer Taylor has agreed to serve as our law enforcement liaison, bringing vital perspective from the security side. Jenny Kim, the flight attendant, stood with a group of airline representatives, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Just yesterday, she had accepted a position as airline protocol advisor to the task force. We've also invited civil rights experts, airline industry veterans, and customer service specialists, Maria continued. Our goal isn't to point fingers, but to create comprehensive solutions that serve everyone: passengers, security officers, and airline staff alike. The announcement detailed specific initiatives, enhanced training programs, clear dispute resolution protocols, and improved communication systems between airlines and security personnel. Each point addressed the factor that had contributed to that night's events. Robert Morgan, watching the press conference on his office computer, felt a mix of shame and relief as Maria specifically avoided naming him, focusing instead on systemic issues rather than individual blame. This task force isn't just about preventing another incident like mine, Maria emphasized, approaching her conclusion. It's about recognizing that every passenger deserves dignity, every security officer deserves proper support, and every airline employee deserves clear protocols. Social media exploded with positive responses. The same platforms that had shared outrage a week ago now praised the constructive approach. #transformation not confrontation began trending within hours. As the press conference concluded, Maria and Officer Taylor stood together, taking questions. Their body language spoke volumes. No tension, no resentment, just two professionals committed to improvement. Isabella watched from the sidelines, remembering Maria's words the night after the incident. The true measure of leadership isn't how you wield power, but how do you transform difficulties into opportunities for change. The sunlight caught Maria's silver hair as she shook hands with Taylor, both of them smiling genuinely for the first time since their encounter on the plane. In that moment, the viral video of an arrest was transformed into something far more powerful, a catalyst for genuine reform. 6 months after the incident on Flight 834, Newark International Airport buzzed with a different kind of energy. In the newly renovated Terminal C, Officer Michael Taylor stood beside Senator Maria Ramirez, watching travelers move smoothly through the upgraded security checkpoints. "Hard to believe it's the same airport," Taylor remarked, adjusting his new uniform. He now wore the insignia of Chief Training Officer for the Airport Security Reform Program. The position had been created as part of the sweeping changes implemented over the past months. Maria nodded, noting how security officers now carry tablets linked directly to airline manifests. "Look at that," she pointed to a nearby gate where a seating dispute was being resolved. The gate agent pulled up the manifest instantly, verified the passenger's information, and solved the issue in under a minute. Jenny Kim, now Director of Customer Relations Training, approached them with a tablet displaying the latest statistics. "Our incident reports are down 70%, she beamed, and customer satisfaction scores have never been higher." The terminal walls featured new digital displays showing real-time flight updates, gate changes, and clear protocols for dispute resolution. Gone were the days of confusion and miscommunication that had led to that fateful evening. Isabella Torres appeared, tablet in hand as always. "Senator, CNN is ready for the anniversary piece. They want to showcase the changes we've implemented." She gestured toward the media setup near the new customer service center. The teenage live streamer, Mia Parker, was there too, now an intern with the Airport Security Reform Task Force's social media team. Her viral video had become part of the training program, used to demonstrate both what could go wrong and how to make it right. "You know," Maria said, watching a young officer calmly help an elderly passenger, "sometimes the best solutions come from our worst moments." The new training center, visible through glass walls, showed a class in session. Officers and airline staff trained together now, breaking down the silos that had contributed to past incidents. On the wall hung a framed photo of Maria and Taylor from that first press conference, a reminder of how conflict could transform into collaboration. Robert Morgan had even reached out, sending a letter that now sat framed in Maria's office. "Your grace under pressure taught me more than any business course ever could." He had become an unexpected advocate for the reform program within the corporate travel community. A group of international airport officials toured the facility, taking notes on the innovations. The program had caught attention worldwide, with several major airports adopting similar reforms. What started as a viral video had evolved into a global model for airport security and customer service. Senator Taylor said, watching another smooth interaction between staff and passengers, "Remember when you told me this would be a chance to make real change?" Maria smiled, remembering their first real conversation after the incident. And look at us now. Who would have thought that one evening could lead to all this? The afternoon sun streamed through the terminal's windows, highlighting the new signage: dignity, safety, service, the reform program's core principles. Below it, travelers moved efficiently through their journeys, aided by well-trained staff equipped with both technology and humanity. Isabella checked her watch. Time for the interview, Senator. They want to do it right here, showing the changes in action. As they walked to the media setup, Maria and Taylor passed the exact gate where their story had begun. Flight 834 still departed from here, but everything else had transformed. The story that could have ended in division had instead sparked unity, turning a moment of conflict into a movement for change. "You know what the best part is?" Maria said, pausing briefly. "It's not just about airports anymore. Other organizations are using our program as a model for their own reforms. Sometimes the biggest changes start in the smallest moments." Taylor nodded, watching another flight board smoothly. Who knew Seat 2 it would end up changing so many lives? The cameras began rolling, ready to tell not just the story of what had happened 6 months ago, but of how a potential tragedy had been transformed into triumph, one positive change at a time.